Thank you very much, Meta, and thank you all very much for coming this evening. It's a real opportunity for me to be able to talk about the situation in Congo, peace and democracy, which is just very close to my heart. I'm the president of Pragmatic. It's an international peace-building organization that's both a policy think tank and a grassroots activist organization. But that's a little bit highfalutin because we're all volunteers and I have a day job. So that's kind of where we're headed as an organization, I suppose. We are dedicated to developing and advocating pragmatic, nonviolent measures to help resolve conflicts, prevent conflict escalation, and to stabilize the peace in post-conflict areas. We do and have conducted conflict resolution analysis on different conflicts, but really right now we're focused on the Democratic Republic of the Congo. So over the past 25 years or so, I've studied many different armed conflicts and always run into people who are talking about the conflict and saying, this is so complex, it's just so complex. And I usually feel like you got to learn a little more, study a bit more. When I feel something's complex, but the truth is, with the Democratic Republic of the Congo, it really is complex, really and truly. And over the past 12 months or so, there have been changes related to potential constitutional crisis, a shift to full-on dictatorship, and every day things are changing. So it adds to the security situation. This really pins and needles day after day, what's happening in terms of the democracy side. So there are a few things that I wanted to achieve in this short time today. I absolutely believe that peace in the Congo is possible. There's been war for more than 20 years, but I do believe that being smart, focused, doing the analysis, doing the advocacy work, that these pragmatic actions can add up to a big difference. You do the right thing, you find the right pressure points. You can make a difference, and when we come to the end, I want you all to believe that the freedom of Fred Bama matters. You'll find out who he is. Okay, so let's get started with some basics. I know some of you may know a fair bit about the Congo, others may not. Some of you may have forgotten what you knew because it's complicated, so we'll just start with some real basics here. And one of those is the Congo is a large country smack dab in the middle of Africa there. And it does have, you can see right here, it's got a little small channel that gives it access to the ocean. So it's not landlocked, just the Congo has 9 neighbors. One of them is the Republic of the Congo. So if you don't know, there is a Republic of the Congo and there is a democratic. There's the Republic of the Congo and the Democratic Republic of the Congo. As is often the case, the one called democratic is not so democratic. Kind of happens that way. Some of the countries around the Congo are undergoing their own strife. The Central African Republic, South Sudan, Burundi right now, just in the last few weeks, you may have heard that they've had uprisings. Uganda is stable, but they've got some cross-border rebel groups that can cause some problems. But really, within this configuration, given what's happening around the Congo, what happens in the Congo affects this whole Great Lakes region and the neighbors, especially towards this east side. So I am going way back. 80,000 years ago, the Bantu people are recorded having been on the territory that we now call the Democratic Republic of the Congo. And way after that, the Pygmy or Twa people arrived. So we don't get the first Europeans until the 1400s. And then in 1885, actually it's before 1885, in 1885, Africa is carved up and we get the boundaries that we have today. But already at that time, in 1876, King Leopold II of Belgium, during an international assembly in Europe, he formed something called the International Congo Society, which cements personal control over the Congo. So the Congo is unique initially, in that it was not a colony of a state. It is land owned by an individual, King Leopold II of Belgium. The boundaries are set then in 1885. The ruthlessness with which he ruled, I mean, we know the colonization anywhere really had this ruthless, but the Congo is known for the horror, as the heart of darkness, and Joseph Conrad wrote about. And it was so bad that public figures, including Mark Twain and leaders in England, pushed and lobbied and protested within political circles to take this colony away from King Leopold. And in 1908, the Congo became a colony under Belgium. Conditions improved somewhat, but it's still awful. I mean, it's still a bad situation. King Leopold, as I'm sure you all know, what did he want in the Congo? He wanted the natural resources and the mining wealth that was there, rubber. So there were great opportunities. And I know it's gruesome. Sorry I left it up so long. But one of the things he was known for is amputating the hands of individuals, of even children. So in the wave of the independence, the post-World War II independence movement, the Congolese, that swept across all continents, the Congo was not left out. The independence movement rose there as well. Maybe really starting towards the late, or picking up steam in the late 1950s. A key leader was Patrice Lumumba, who was a prominent African national, and he formed the first non-tribal political party in the Congo. So really had a notion of state and democracy and what independence in this country would be. And in 1960, he was elected prime minister, and in June 1960, at the moment of independence, he had been prime minister for 6 days. At that time, the head of his army was a young colonel, Joseph Mobutu. To this day, people look to Lumumba for his power and his wisdom about the self-confidence of the Congolese people and what this country could be. So, the day will come when history will speak. Africa will write its own history. It will be a history of glory and dignity. This really continues to inspire a lot of people in the Congo. I think he still remains the great leader and visionary for this country. So in 1960, same year as independence, Lumumba has just become elected and he's prime minister, but already Colonel Joseph Mobutu leads a coup in the country. He doesn't himself take over the leadership, he hands it to the opposition political leaders. The very next year, Lumumba is murdered while being held prisoner by Mobutu's troops. The CIA is implicated, but I think at this point it's not implicated. I think everybody's owned up to the fact that it was a CIA assassination. I think even in the last few years, the assassin himself was tracked down in the US and interviewed. So tremendous tragedy for the country. Lumumba had conversations with the Soviets. He was interested in socialist ideas, as many were at that time. So that was sort of the reasoning behind that assassination. In 1965, now it's Lieutenant General Mobutu holds another coup. And this time, he takes the role of president to himself. He renames the country Zaire, for those who are familiar with that term, and he rules in what people call a kleptocracy, because he took what he could from this land to himself. And I don't know that there's anybody else, any other dictator ruler for whom that term has been used, but it is synonymous with Mobutu. During the Cold War, the US supports Mobutu as a foothold in Africa against the communist Soviet Union. We know that was happening everywhere. People were dividing up the geopolitical space globally. I will add, because he comes back into play, a man named Etienne Tshisekedi. He forms a political party in 1982, look at how we're jumping through this so fast, to oppose and fight Mobutu's regime. And in 1991, Mobutu names him prime minister because he's getting pressure now in 1991 to let in more opposition voices. We're getting close to the end of the Cold War. The US is kind of putting pressure now for opposition voices to be heard in a constituent assembly. Mobutu did well. I mean, he in that context, people were not concerned about what he did to maintain his hold on power, and he was a ruthless, ruthless dictator. The path or course of what might have been, we never know, but certainly Rwanda's genocide and civil war of 1994 has really written the history of the Congo now for 20 years. At the end of the Cold War, the American and Soviet interests vanish, power vacuum. I mean, it's the same thing everywhere. And in Rwanda and the Congo, space opened up for civil war that had not existed before. I really won't go into the Rwandan genocide. I think you all know the story of what happened there. There's a Hutu majority population in Rwanda, a Tutsi minority. Under colonialism, the Tutsis were considered higher up, had better jobs. Hutus become the government, and plans are put in place for a genocide of the Tutsi population. The genocide is carried out very quickly. You all know this, in a matter of, well, they say 100 days. Moderate Hutus are also killed at this time. And then forces from outside the country, Rwandan Tutsi forces, come in to push back the Hutus, to take the land, to stop the genocide. And Paul Kagame, who's now president, is one of those leaders. As he comes through, as his forces come through and take the land and restore order and stop the genocide, atrocities are committed against Hutus, and Hutus of all stripes flee the country. And they flee across the border into the Congo, into Goma, and other places, but more than 2 million by August, in a matter of a few months, flow across the border into eastern Congo. And it's really this flow of Hutu Rwandans that comes to plague the Congo. Not them, but that situation. Within this exodus, there are the génocidaires, those who committed, both political leaders, army leaders, Interahamwe, who committed the genocide. They're part of the Hutus who come across the border, and they become embedded in the refugee camps. Those running the camps ultimately cannot control what is happening, and these Hutu leaders tighten control and reform and regroup with the idea of going back to attack Rwanda, which now has Hutus again in leadership positions, and of course it's had Tutsis and Tutsi left government since. Primarily, it's not along such ethnic lines today. So what comes of this? The refugees mostly go home, but a small group of the genocidaires stay in the Congo, and they're there today, called the FDLR rebel group. They're the former genocidaire Hutus. I have to say that, I mean, that's what everybody says, but it's 20 years on, I'm going to think that there are also young people joining these groups, and so it's varied. And we do know that young men do come from Rwanda to join this group. The presence of the Rwandan Hutu rebels in the Congo and their continued presence is a major focal point for a lot of other things that happen. So it gets complicated. In the Congo, up until this time, people hadn't really thought about Hutus and Tutsis as ethnic groups. If you'd ask people, yes, but they actually had other names for them that was more about what part of eastern Congo they settled in the upper plains and so on. So this division of Hutu-Tutsi comes into play because of the Rwandan genocide and civil war. And an ethnic cleansing campaign is supported by Mobutu and local leaders. At this time, your power is very ethnically based. And so you've got this massive influx from a different ethnic group that was just tiny. And I say, not only did Congolese not think of them this way, these were tiny ethnic groups. And so it disturbs the power with the Tutsis now in power in Rwanda. That's also upsetting to Mobutu, and things tip. And this is really what starts the First Congolese War in 1996. Rwanda, Uganda, and Burundi come together to support this man, Laurent Kabila. He's Tutsi, and he's supporting a Congolese Tutsi rebel group. And it's astonishing. It's a big, big, vast country. But with the support of Rwanda, Uganda, and Burundi, his rebel group really doesn't have a lot of difficulty in walking from the east right over to Kinshasa. And when you read the news reports, it's just remarkable how quickly, week after week, you can see them moving. And you think at some point the army's going to be there and stop them, but they don't. It never happens. And so he ends up being inaugurated as president, and Mobutu is now in exile, where he dies naturally of cancer. All of this comes to play today. So Kabila, he's now in power, and he's got all these advisors. He even has a Rwandan minister of defense, but it's not, the political elite is not happy with this at all. So he expels his former allies, who of course are not pleased with this at all, and they come back to invade. They've put him in power, and now within a short period of time, he's saying, oh, you've got to get all your troops out, you've got to be entirely gone. They come back, let me just see. So this Second Congolese War brings in about 20 different armed groups. It involves many countries. Some people call it the African War or the World War. It is by the time we get to about 2008, because it continues on, it's between 3 and 5 million people have died, many from starvation, malnutrition, disease, which are part and parcel, of course, of this kind of village-to-village conflict and war. But Laurent Kabila doesn't last long. He's assassinated, and his son, Joseph Kabila, becomes president. He kind of comes out of nowhere. He's been raised in Tanzania. He doesn't speak Lingala, the main language of sort of the western part of the Congo. He doesn't really speak French. Here he comes in, and nobody really knows who he is. It happens very quickly. It seems the concern that with the assassination of the president, who were we going to put in? And it ends up being Joseph Kabila. He does a quick tour of Western capitals, and people are quite impressed, actually. And he quite quickly is able to pull various rebel groups together and negotiate a peace deal that in the end of 2002 and 2003, it comes into effect, which ends the Second Congolese War. So 1994 to 2003, just the entire country affected by this. So things change. It is definitely, with this peace deal, there is a lot of positive change and very quick positive change. But it doesn't happen in the East. In the Eastern region, there continue to be rebel groups that are fighting, and it goes on. So the first time I went to the Congo was in 2010, and I didn't know a lot. I thought I knew something, and I go to Kinshasa, in the very west side of the country, and to talk to different groups, and I had meetings with the UN and with the peacekeepers and with different international and local NGOs, with lots of different people. And I kept hearing that there's no war. I thought, oh man, I came to the country to do conflict resolution and there's no war. Like, how misinformed am I? It was very strange. And I asked, well, the peacekeepers are here. I'm trying to find some angle. But they said, oh, they're nothing but trouble. I flew to the east, to Goma, and I could have been in a different country. I mean, they're so far apart, but the situation there, the concerns with security, the ongoing armed conflict, on everybody's mind, people so appreciative of the UN there. They were playing maybe less of a security role than making sure that aid was protected, getting out to people. So that's sort of the 2003, there's a main group, the CNDP Congolese Tutsis. Again, Kabila gets them to sign a peace agreement in 2008. Major achievement, really big achievement. Bosco is the head of the CNDP at that time. You may have heard of him, sort of called the Terminator by some people. And he's now sitting in the International Criminal Court in The Hague. And his rebel troops are integrated into the Congolese army. In fact, this is what happens in 2003 as well. The fighters have the option to be integrated into the army. What else are you going to do? I mean, you're between a rock and a hard place. So there was a campaign in the last few years to get this man, Bosco, to this leader of the CNDP to The Hague and have, because he's done ruthless things and nobody denies it. But the thing is, his freedom is what you had to do to negotiate to get that peace in 2008. These are tough decisions, and those were the decisions that got made at the time, and the people in the Congolese people accepted it and were fine, so I just have to accept their judgment that this was the thing. Peace was the most important thing in the East now. So there's a quiet time. There's still the FDLR, Rwandan Hutu rebels. So they periodically attack villages ruthlessly, the gang rape, the plunder, causing many, many, many thousands and hundreds of thousands of people to be internally displaced. During the war, the Second Congolese War, village defense groups were created called Mai groups, and they received guns and support from the government. The idea being the government couldn't protect all of the country from invaders, so you arm these village defense groups. And they worked very well, actually, during the Second Congolese War, and they served that function. But now you've got these young men, they've got their guns, there's no more war, what are they gonna do? A lot of them continue to fight, and they find reasons, and they say, well, the FDLR is here, so we're going to fight them. They're ethnically based, these Mai groups, because they're village-based, and the villages are very naturally from different tribes, different ethnic groups, so you've got ethnically based Mai groups. And self-defense notion really does go out the window. They become their own rebel groups, and whatever the rationale, they also commit atrocities at this time. Still, from 2008 to 2012, it is relatively quiet. I mean, it's hard to say that. It's terrible to say. It's only in the context of the Congo, because you still have more than 1 million people displaced, but it is better. Now, I was in the East again through 2010 and 2012, and I'm not on the ground much. But even I knew and was told by different people who were very much in the know and credible that the CNDP was maintaining who had been integrated into the army, was maintaining a parallel command structure. I happened to stay at it's a hotel, maybe a guest house place that little that I know, didn't know a lot, was actually owned by the former CNDP. So you'd see people coming and going. This is the Congolese Tutsi rebels. It's one of those groups. And in 2012, sure enough, they extracted themselves from the army and became the M23 that, again, took over they came right into Goma, were able to take over Goma. The UN did nothing, they stood back. So I'm going to quickly switch gears, because that's a lot of stuff, to the what's happening on the political side. At the same time, we've got that. 2003 is the first major peace agreement, 2008 sort of the final one for the East for a while. 2006 there are elections, and they're democratic elections. Everybody and their kid brother comes to town, comes to the Congo to be observers. Canada sent a contingent of observers. When you look at the list, I mean, you wonder how everybody managed to fit in this country, and where on earth did they stay? There were just lots and lots, and they said, yeah, there's some irregularities here, but these are free and fair elections, and Joseph Kabila becomes the elected president. So he's been in office since 2001, but 2006 begins his first term as president because now he's elected. 2011, curious situation. Kabila is running again to be president, very keen on keeping his power. Tshisekedi is the main opposition leader, but the opposition is fragmented. And Tshisekedi, he's a lone wolf, he's a maverick. He cannot get the opposition under him to solidify. And we're just getting closer and closer and closer to the October elections. And the opposition isn't unifying. Nobody's can get them all to come together. Nobody's stepping down, which pretty much says Kabila's got a cakewalk. He's going to win. But people are smart. People get it. I mean, if there's ever a time for strategic voting, this was a time for strategic voting, and people understood that. And when you talk to people, they talk about who they vote for, but really, every person I talked to was ultimately weighing the best chance for peace. And some people were going to vote for Kabila because they were scared that if they didn't vote for him, he would use the military forces that he could to create war. Some people didn't want Tshisekedi because he's really disturbs things, and he was really anti-Rwanda, and they were afraid he would start a war. But then the election happens. People do their, with the strategic voting, you now don't know who's going to win. Probably Kabila. I mean, Tshisekedi's a long shot, but he's not out anymore because people are really looking. I've got one or the other. The opposition didn't have to unify, but lots of irregularities. Trucks come with ballots and they're already marked. Military standing there just saying, this is who you're voting for. Oh, that's who you're voting for. I mean, all this kind of stuff going on. Blatant. And the only observers this time, everybody, I guess the excitement's gone. The European Union sends observers. The Carter Center, Jimmy Carter, his center sends observers. And the biggest group of observers, election observers, is the Catholic Church in the Congo. And they're very neutral. And at the end of the day, a few days after the election, the results are announced, and Kabila's won. Everybody goes, well, no. You can't just say this is the result. It's 53 to 47 or so. You actually have to say, riding by riding, what the results were. And they said, well, that's going to take us a couple weeks. Yeah, it's going to take a while to count the votes. That's the whole game here, is you count the votes. So they go back and count the votes, and Kabila still wins. But on record, the official record today, you can see that there's a lot of nonsense. 100% on some polling stations vote for one person. And another place, everybody's voting for somebody who's of a completely different ethnic group, which just doesn't happen. You'll have people, but not wholeheartedly for somebody that's not from their community. 100% turnout in some places, which is delightful, but very unlikely. So the irregularities ultimately didn't even matter. Just, he said, here's what the vote is. This is, he won. So he is sworn in, but Tshisekedi gets sworn in as well. He has a private swearing in. There are some heads of state, very, very tense, that end of 2011. But ultimately, Tshisekedi has been, I think I'm going to say, quiet. And so Joseph Kabila is president on his next term. And he operates as if he's president, and there's a parliament, and what are your alternatives? Away we go. So current situation, bring us up to date. We're almost there. So right now, I've already said, we've got the FDLR, Rwandan Hutu rebels on the ground, the Lord's Resistance Army from, if you remember, Uganda's up in the north, if you know your map. So they've come around, they're up there. Lord's Resistance Army, not very many left, haven't been many for a long time, but they are so brutal and vicious that you just need a whisper on the wind that they're in a village nearby, and you get mass movements, tens of thousands of internally displaced people out of fear. When I was in Kinshasa, once I was talking to the head of the UN peacekeeper, forces there, who's based there. And she said that there had been this mass exodus, tens of thousands of people in the forest of the Northeast, and that it was Lord's Resistance Army is who they were running from. And they sent a number of helicopters up to try to find where these rebels were and so on. And they just couldn't find any evidence that something had happened. But now you're dealing with 50, 60, 80,000 people who aren't in their homes, that need food, clothing, shelter because of the fear. The Congolese, I've talked about the Mai Mai. We have not talked, we're talking east. It tends to be that central east that borders on Rwanda. I should have a map up again now. But in the south, there's a separatist group in the Katanga province. And Katanga has lots, it's a major center for the mining. So they'd be very happy to be separatists, and they've been separatists for decades now. There's also an anti-pygmy rebel group. And then there's some odd things that happen. There's a man, Etienne Kabila, who is the recognized legitimate son of Laurent Kabila. So he was arrested with a lot of people in South Africa for planning a coup in the Congo. You know, this is out of left field, right? I mean, this kind of tells you how things can be. A lot of people think that Joseph Kabila, you think Obama's got birther problems. Joseph Kabila, there's a huge story around how he's not really Laurent Kabila's son, but in fact, he's a Rwandan. And he's got another name, and that he's really the Trojan horse. A one-off extremist religious group in Kinshasa was able to take over a radio stations and attempt a coup, which is to say, oh, and I've missed the FARDC. The FARDC, that is that's the Congolese army, and according to any Congolese person in Eastern Congo, they're no different from the rebels. The villagers are forced to be porters and carry things from village to village. The Congolese army commits gang rape. For a time, a battalion had over 1,000 soldiers and even more villagers working in a mine. They were just not letting anyone in. That's what this battalion did. So according to the people, they don't feel safe. The military doesn't, I don't know, they seem to be a legitimate force and legitimately allowed to do harm to them, let me put it that way. You know, we knew what the rebels wanted in 1996. You knew there's stabilization of power with Hutus and Tutsis, the desire for power to take over and have a coup in Kinshasa. But today, they seem to exist, and calling them rebel groups, I frankly find a little bit grand. They're gangs, they're thugs. They cooperate with their sworn enemies when it suits them. And how do they cooperate? Well, perhaps they're getting money from a mine, so they tax along the road. There's a legitimate mine, it comes out, one group will tax here, another group will tax there, and they've all got it arranged so everybody gets a cut of the minerals that are coming along, and they let each other do it, and they have reasons why they'll collude. Well, we're both against Kabila, or we're both, but really they're supposed to be sworn enemies, and their convictions are pretty weak. So they really are, at this point, existing to exist for the most part. And I'm not even sure whether the FDLR, the Rwandan Hutus, really imagine they're going to take over Rwanda again. It just doesn't seem that, even in a wild imagination, that's what they're doing. And certainly their activities are preying on the Congolese people, and they don't really focus on trying to take over Rwanda. As you can imagine, the impact on people is devastating. It's, you know, you talk all this talk and it's just, but the people impact is huge. UN Development Index is 188 out of 189 countries. The average income per person per year is at $444. Half of women are illiterate. Right now, the average number of years of school, education gets all disrupted by this, right? It's not just people don't go to school, it gets really disrupted, is 3.1 years. That's the average number of years of education. Right now, we've got 500,000 Hutu Rwandan refugees stuck in Eastern Congo. Not all the civilians went back, and they thought there were about 250,000. They did a census finally after 15 plus years, and there's 500,000, which makes sense really that they've had children now and they're still in the forests. So how do we get from here to where we want to be? Pragmora is making an effort. We've got some thoughts, we've got some ideas. So we have a very rigorous approach to conflict resolution analysis. And it starts with getting an inventory of all the options for non-violent solutions. We only deal in the non-violent. And we inventory. So we look, we do books and academical articles on the internet, what NGOs are saying. We get in country and talk to people. When I'm in the Congo, I'll talk to very senior people at the UN. I'll talk to military experts. You talk to the taxi driver. You talk to your hotel server, international NGOs, local NGOs, journalists. Get out in the villages and talk to the former child soldiers themselves. Ask them. They know a thing or two about what the interests are. It is just really critical part of our approach to conflict resolution analysis to start with, as much as we can get on the table, what are the ideas people have for bringing about a long-term stable peace within the context of democracy? We then have criteria for selecting and getting them and winnowing down this list to get to a pragmatic list. And the pragmatic one is do no harm to the people we're intending to help. So if we think that some action somehow is going to hurt people inadvertently, or it's, you hurt people to get to your goal, we're not going to do that. That's off the table. Can it be done? If we have an international campaign on this action, could it really happen? Is it realistic? And third, if we get it to happen, will it make a real difference? Or is it just, yeah, we can get it to happen, but it's not really important for peace and democracy? We vet, we go to people, we ask, and we have an iterative process. I will say this is not about the root causes of the conflict. We are standing where we are now and looking forward. How do we resolve it? Some of those things we resolve going forward have long roots. But there are things that are root causes that just don't relate to what need to be done going forward. I mean, if you think of a root cause being colonialism, you can say, well, let's end colonialism. Oh, that happened. So you can kind of go this way. So some of the actions have long roots, but we look at it from here. Where are we going forward? And very specific, how to resolve the conflict, how to prevent conflict escalation. And we ask the question, and we ask it of a lot of people, and we glean information from lots of places. So here are some of the core issues right now for conflict resolution in the Congo. Each one of them I could spend a long, long time on, but I'm not going to. I'm just going to quickly go very lightly through a few, and then we're going to talk about that limited democracy a little bit more. And even there, just focus on one slice. Okay. So reduce the number of young men who join rebel groups. I think you all know that children in the Congo are forced to join groups. There are child soldiers that continues to today. But a lot of young men choose to join rebel groups, or they're demobilized and they choose to rejoin. And a critical issue is that young men and former child soldiers, male former child soldiers, simply have no prospects. They've got no livelihood. They've got nothing. I mean, it's really hard for somebody sitting in Goma, which is quite a big town right now, with an education. Even those young people look forward and think, there's nothing here. But if you've missed out on your education, or you were taken very young as a child soldier, you've got nothing to look for. So joining a rebel group is a really good option. You get fed well, you've got prestige, you can take what you want, you've got a band of people who treat you with respect and you treat them with respect. It's a very sensible option. So pragmatic action is about expanding livelihood opportunities. That's just a repeat there. And that sounds very obvious, but within the paradigm of development, the focus is very much on making sure that girls and young women get education and get opportunities. I'm sure you all know the reasons why. If you help out the young women, it does much better for the community, and so on. But the development paradigm is separate from a conflict resolution or a peace building. And in that conflict resolution and peace building, there isn't the same thinking about doing livelihood training and so on. So and it galls people too, that people who have committed atrocities, we're now going to give them foreign aid. But what do you want? Do you want to be galled? Do you want justice, or do you want peace? People are being put off their lands to this day. If people are wealthy and politically connected, are able to buy massive tracts of land. So even if you did have a livelihood, it can be taken away. I shouldn't even put that anti-conflict minerals there, because that's a big, big story on what happens we can talk about later if people want to talk about. Just very quickly, other issues with the young men joining the rebel groups. Because so consistently the path to peace has been to reintegrate the rebels into the army, well, if you want to get a step up in society, join a rebel group, demobilize, get in the army. You get to leapfrog. And this going from having nothing, you can actually have something. Not that the army's very good in the Congo. They have issues with payment and food and all sorts of things. But it is a way up. So you actually have an incentive now, because it's happened so many times. Join a rebel group, then I can be in the army, which you otherwise could not happen. So at this point, although it's been a path to peace in the past, it's really contributing to instability and to more conflict in the East. I'm going to move on a bit here. Okay. Again, I'm just so lightly going over this. So there's 500,000 Rwandan refugees in the forests of eastern Congo. It's a problem because the Congolese people either think that they are the rebels or that they are supporting the rebels. And the truth is, there is a relationship with the Rwandan. These are Rwandan Hutu refugees from the 1994 Rwandan Civil War. They do have a relationship with that rebel group because nobody's helping them. They're Rwandan Hutus. Nobody's helping them. So if they get attacked by another group, a my Congolese my group, who's going to help them? They're just civilians. It'll be the former genocidaire and so on will help them. There's a symbiotic relationship. And after all these years, it blows my mind. It's only in the last 2-3 years that finally these refugees are even being documented. They just weren't even documented. You can't return people, you can't resettle unless they're documented. And they weren't even being visited. They were just known, they're out there. So there's a real opportunity now to resettle them in the Congo or back in Rwanda under international protocols. The individuals decide for themselves which way they want to go. Now, I've talked to the head of the Rwandan Refugee Civil Society, the head of this 500,000, and the things he says are pretty crazy. They don't have contact with outside people, so they're getting their information from the Rwandan Hutu rebels who are saying, if you go back, you'll be slaughtered. Everybody who goes across the board back into Rwanda is slaughtered. They just have all of these stories that have been fed, and they have no idea outside their bubble really what's going on for 20 years. So this is all doable. We're taking the steps in the last few years, but I don't think there's any excuse for not moving it forward quickly. And the need for communication is critical because there's so much misinformation now. Moving on very quickly, farmers versus herders. This is a fundamental issue in conflict in eastern Congo with ethnic Tutsis who speak Rwandaphone, the Rwandan, they speak the Rwandan language. Others do not. And they take their cattle across the lands of the farmers and destroy crops. But that's what the Tutsis have, the cattle. They need to move them so that they can graze. Other people need their farms. And frankly, this is one, it may sound trite, it may sound light, this is one of the most difficult issues that I've yet to hear anybody come up with how to resolve it. I'm going to move on now to the question of democracy. So really in the last 12 months there's been a change, really well since January, in terms of the government limiting freedom of speech and freedom of peaceful assembly. The media, you've got to be pretty brave just to write what you think. And the question is, the government, is Kabila legitimate or not? Of course that adds into uncertainty. Critical issue, and I said things are changing day by day. One of them is Joseph Kabila wants to stay in power, and he's looking for lots of ways to do it. For example, I mentioned that M12 that took over the East in 2012. Well, he says, well, look, they were there for 18 months, and we did our best, but we didn't have control of them. So I didn't really have control of the country for 18 months. So I should have, that doesn't count as my second term. So I should have another 18 months at the end of my term. I mean, pretty interesting gymnastics, right? Mm-hmm. He also is trying to change the Constitution that limits it to 2 terms so they could have more. But the people who wrote that Constitution in 1964 were smart, smart, smart. And they said, there is nothing you can do to change these articles of the Constitution that are 2 terms. So everything else you can have a referendum, you have this, but the one that says 2 terms only for the president, it's locked. You can't unlock it. So they're looking for ways to unlock it. I'm just gonna skip this because I think I want to get through the last bit. Pragmatic is doing a lot of different things, and we've got more campaigns coming. But we've got a real focus right now on this Free Fred and Free Yves campaign. Very quickly, what happened is last March, youth from the Congo, from Senegal, and Burkina Faso met in Kinshasa, and they had a press conference, and then they had a gathering of youth to figure out how to get youth more involved in political processes and in the electoral process. Partly funded by the US government. And they met, and the intelligence services came in and arrested 30 or 40 people, including a whole lot of foreigners. The people were released quite quickly, but today is day 248. Fred Bama and Yves Makwambala remain in prison for, I can't even say it wasn't even a demonstration. They were having a workshop. So this peaceful workshop about nonviolent ways to engage youth. And obviously it was very above board because they were having a press conference at the same time. Fred was held at first for 50 days in solitary confinement. He didn't have access to lawyers, to family, to friends. The Congolese National Assembly did send a committee, so we met with them once during this period. Since then, he's been transferred and he's in a regular prison. He's part of a group called La Lucha, based in Goma, a group that I have the greatest respect for, a young youth movement. They're not even a group, I shouldn't call them a group. They're a movement, and they're just super smart, dedicated young people, dedicated to nonviolent action, and they are braver than you can even begin to imagine. They stand up and do peaceful demonstrations, even when the police come and beat them and take them, and sometimes they're tortured and then released, and they go back the next day, they go back the next week. One young woman who is a leader, Micheline, of this group, she was taken and detained overnight. A young man came with her because of the possibility of sexual violence in these contexts. Somebody came with her. They are super smart about civic action, about peace, about democracy. They advocate too for clean water in Goma. They did a brilliant campaign just to get more paved roads. And they did. They aimed for, I think, 12 kilometers more of paved road in Goma, and I think they ended up with 24 or something. It's a big deal in Goma, and I'm very appreciative personally for that little bit of paved road. But they are smart and they are brave. And Fred Bama is one of the leaders of La Lucha. The reason, when there are 40 people arrested, why are these two still there? Yves is the nephew of an opposition leader, so he kind of seems that he got caught up in this. He doesn't seem to be a core person. He did the graphic design for an emblem. It's nothing. The people are supporting La Lucha and the Free Fred and Free Yves campaign. The Special Commission gave its report and said there's no evidence here that they did anything. The United Nations has spoken up and is now taking them on actually as a legal case. The United States State Department has spoken out for them. The European Union passed a resolution. The UK, Amnesty International, Human Rights Watch. I mean, there's just no question of their innocence in this arbitrary detention that covers everybody. Everybody sees if in this circumstance, funded by the US government, they can come in and imprison them. That's the chill, right? That's when they are so clearly nonviolent. It's not, there's no question. And they remain held day 248 since March 15th. That is the chill. With all these people who have spoken up, Canada hasn't. It kind of surprises me, and we're working on that. I'll go quickly through this. But I want to tell you something about Fred Bama, because he's really the prize in this. Yves got caught up in it. He is a calm, thoughtful, he's a polite young man. I'm going to add that to his credit. He's intelligent, and he really, how it came about, I don't know, but he's so committed to nonviolent civic action. He, as one of his friends said, he's in love with the Congo, and he speaks quietly and thoughtfully, even kind of slowly, but he speaks with great power and passion. I'm going to read this. There's a bit more here. I'm sure this is something Fred, this is his thoughts. He's 25 years old, by the way. He was 24 when he was taken. I'm sure we are writing our own story, a story of glory and dignity. We are building a strong country. Lumumba was right. From the depths of this prison where I find myself today, I hold my head high. Hope to see the Congo rise from its ashes is now the only thing that keeps me alive and allows me to hold on. I dream of the day when people will talk about my country, not as the rape capital of the world, not as the potentially rich country that is the poorest in the world, not in terms of violations of human rights, but of a country that is a beautiful place to live. A prosperous country, an example of development, of environmental conservation, of conflict transformation, peace building, respect for women, and education. An example of a country that has been able to arise from nothing. I fight for it every day, and this dream illuminates my life. It will not happen immediately, but this Congo will exist. This is the Congo I will bequeath to my children and their children. The Congo will change by its worthy son. You may wonder why the government's concerned about this young man, eh? Yeah. So why he matters, it's his human rights matters, but Pragmatic doesn't, Amnesty International, Human Rights Watch do that. We're a peace organization, and for peace in the Congo, you need democracy. His freedom would be an indicator of change, and that would release that chill that people have, that fear that they're going to be taken in the same way. Others would be able to speak up, and if right now people have to be able to speak up and assemble if we're going to get free and fair elections next year. He's one person, but he matters. And, you know, I know Fred, I know him personally, and you gotta wonder if this worthy son of the Congo, maybe he's got what it takes to change his country and help it fulfill all that promise it has had for all these decades. what you can do, I'm not going to go through it. If you sign up, I can send you email. We've got, we're just shifting a little bit of our direct email campaign, but we've been directly emailing the leaders in the Congo. Good response there, really effective. We've got to change things up and then restart again. We want Canada's voice, so we've got an open letter we're working on. Thrilled that Science for Peace is one of the signatories on that open letter, and we're looking to, we've got others involved, senators and politicians, but we're still working to build that out. And so I thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much.